Good morning. Welcome to the fourth leg of the National Productivity Webinar Series. I am Nessa Nolido of RTWPB6. I will be your moderator for today's session. As background, the National Productivity Conference is a platform for discussing developments and issues affecting the country's productivity and competitiveness. While we used to convene this conference face-to-face, this year, we are doing it via online Zoom in compliance with the health and quarantine measures. And again, this year, because of the pandemic and its impact on our lives and our work, we have aptly themed this virtual conference as driving productivity in the better normal. It recognizes the need to deepen our understanding of the challenges brought by this pandemic and the policy and program responses to leverage the opportunities as we bounce back, hopefully with greater resilience and efficiency to unlock productivity in the new normal. Given our theme, we have lined up webinars every Thursday. We have started last September 3 and will last until November 5. Moving forward, the remaining topics in this series are on government programs to accelerate technology adoption, employment outlook post-COVID, future of work, and business responses to the new normal, such as the use of actionable intelligence, automation, business reconfiguration, and employee engagement. Corky, are we ready?
Yes, Ms. Nessa. Just a few reminders for our participants. First, we will turn your videos off and keep your audios on mute while the session is ongoing to minimize interruptions. Second, we encourage you to answer the poll questions that will be flashed in your screens. Third is Q&A and chat boxes are available at the bottom of your screen for your questions, comments, or feedback. And lastly, please make sure that you complete the evaluation form after the session to qualify to receive a certificate of participation. Ms. Nessa, I think it's time for the poll question this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Corky. Now it's time to pull up our first poll question, and I would like to request everyone to answer. Can we pull up the first question, please? Okay, let me read our first question. Which of the following do you think will be the most important issue in the future of work? First is digitalization, automation, and the fourth industrial revolution. Demographic changes, climate change, COVID-19 pandemic, and others. I will read again the question. Which of the following do you think will be the most important issue on the future of work? Digitalization, automation, and the fourth industrial revolution, demographic changes, climate change, COVID-19 pandemic, and others. Please click the submit button if you're done. May we now have the second poll question? Okay, our second poll question is, what are the areas of your company's business operation that have substantially changed because of the pandemic? You can choose several choices. No, it's a multiple choice. One is hiring of employees, compensation and benefits administration, sales and marketing, production, quality control, after-sales service, or others. Again, let me read the second poll question. What areas of your company's business operation have substantially changed because of the pandemic? Hiring of employees, compensation and benefits administration, sales and marketing, production, quality control, after-sales service, and others. Please click the submit button if you're done. Are we ready for our third poll question? May we request that it be pulled up? Our third poll question is, what are the major challenges that you think your company will face in the new normal? Again, you can have several choices. First is compliance with occupational safety and health standards. Second, adjustment of production processes to meet the emerging demands of consumers. And third is acquisition of new technology. Let me read again our third poll question. What are the major challenges that you think your company will face in the new normal? Compliance with occupational safety and health standards, adjustment of production processes to meet the emerging demands of consumers, and acquisition of new technology. Please click the submit button if you're done. And the last poll question, may I request that it be pulled up? Our fourth question is, what is the general prospect of your company in the new normal? Your first choice is your company will be able to overcome the challenges in the new normal, or your company will need government's assistance to survive in the new normal. Again, let me read. What is the general prospect of your company in the new normal? Your company will be able to overcome the challenges in the new normal, or your company will need government's assistance to survive in the new normal.
Thank you for answering our poll questions. We will show the results after the presentation of our resource person. So to present the future of work in a healthier and more resilient environment, please welcome the Enterprise Development Specialist of the International Labor Organization's Country Office in the Philippines, Mr. Hideki Kagohashi.
Hello, good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Good morning, everyone. As introduced, I'm Hideki Kagohashi, Enterprise Development Specialist of the ILO. I have an honor of speaking on the topic of future of work in a healthier and more resilient environment today. Thank you. Ms. Koki, am I supposed to jump into my presentation?
Yes, sir, you
Or
can present and show
Okay.
and share your presentation to all of us, sir.
Okay, okay, great. So let me start sharing. Mhm. Why I am not? Okay. Is this? Could you allow another one of, I'm attending through two channels. Could you allow another one of mine to share the screen?
Okay,
I
sir.
cannot find the button now. Okay, now I find the option. Okay.
So as we wait for Mr. Kagohashi's presentation, oh, there, sir.
Okay, are we ready?
Yes, sir.
Great. I seem to have some difficulties in changing the size. Of my presentation.
I think it's okay, sir. The presentation is okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now I see the. Okay, I cannot change the size. So let me stop the video to focus on the presentation. Okay. So once again, good morning, everyone. Let me begin my presentation titled Future Work in a Healthier and More Resilient Environment, Accelerating the Global Learning on the Evolving Future Work Towards a Better Normal of the Philippines. As you have heard, I'm one of the two ILO speakers who will speak in 2 consecutive weeks. So next week, you will hear from my colleague on the latest on the labor market impact of the COVID-19. So I will save that issue for the next week, and I will talk the less on the labor market issue, but more on issues on SMEs, future work, etc. Let me begin by revisiting the ILO Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work, which came out about a year ago. As you may recall, it had 3 pillars of increasing investment in people's capabilities, increasing investment in the institutions of work, and increasing investment in decent and sustainable work. The very important message of the declaration was that the future work is not predetermined by any technologies, but it is up to us to shape it. Coincidentally, the next World Economic Forum will debate the Great Reset with future work. It says that COVID-19 is a catalyst to reinvent the future of work and create opportunities for companies to look at things differently. Indeed, the future of work and life is already here with the pandemic. As the pandemic has brought the future of work much faster than we thought. However, the new normal is pretty much what the future work debate anticipated. And good news is that most of the future work recommendations remain valid in the new normal context, as you see in the following. Before the COVID-19, we have identified world work deficits, particularly for the Philippines, as you see here. And many of the issues become even more challenging under this pandemic. By the way, you noticed that the thinking behind the future work discussion was that the transformation is driven by 3 key drivers: technology, climate change, and demographics. That's why the question 1 covered these plus the pandemic, because now we have to see the fourth key driver, which is the pandemic. I'm not going to visit the details of each of the recommendations because I have 30 minutes to speak, but I have roughly 50 slides in front of me. So I have to run very fast or skip some of these. But the thing is that many of the recommendations you see, such as lifelong learning for all, supporting people through transitions, these become even more relevant under the pandemic. Likewise, crafting the institutions of work has become more important under the new normal. And the question is, what would be the decent and sustainable work we would want in a better normal? Okay, now let's take where we are now. Back in June, IMF released the new projection comparing the pre-COVID-19 growth projection and the projection now taking into account the negative impact of the COVID-19, which we all know is the worst recession, which the pandemic has brought the worst recession since the Great Depression. All of the world has suffered from the pandemic, starting from China, rest of the emerging and developing economies, as well as the advanced economies. But the thing is that it is the emerging and developing economies, which includes the Philippines. This group is the one which has suffered the most. Well, I touched upon the Great Reset being the next topic of the World Economic Forum, and thinking behind it is the deep concern on inequality. I quoted the word of Klaus Schwab, who is the World Economic Forum founder and executive chairman. I'm not going to read all these, but the inequality concern is once again pronounced in the new normal context, because some worries that professionals, right? We are doing the video conferencing. Those of us who can do may be able to follow the faster recovery path, but those who cannot may continue suffering. So that's why the recovery, this kind of recovery is called K-shape, not the V-shape, U-shape, L-shape recovery. Let's take an example of remote work. Is it going to be the standard in the new normal? Well, the ILO estimates that 27% of the workers could work from home, but this is in the case of high-income countries. So what will be the situation for the rest of the world? Of course, this will bring new opportunities for old workers, female workers wanting to work from home, those living outside metropolitan areas. Yes, that's a new opportunity. We see the impact on the urban offices. But the concern is that we may be seeing the emergence of the new digital divide. Those who cannot do the remote work because they have no choice but to commute, or those living in the crowded housing, they have higher risk of infection. They remain relatively time poor, and wage stagnation is likely, while the digital workers may enjoy the better wage and better wage increase. And we can expect even more challenges to come. Well, after more than 6 months in the pandemic, we can still see prolonged period of new normal, despite the some of the promising news about the vaccines. The prolonged demand depression, it may be impacting the tourism industry, hotel industry, convention industry. Prolonged demand depression may push even more businesses to the edge, and when some of the big ones fail, we could expect domino effect of many following the bankruptcies. From the labor market perspectives, we are deeply concerned about the possible emergence of the COVID-19 generation or the new lost generation because of COVID-19, such as the new graduates and those who lost jobs, who may suffer from unemployment for longer period than before. Then the informal entrepreneurs and workers represent the current resilience, but they are the ones who suffer the most under the pandemic. So the big question is what to do now. Well, there are some data behind this discussion. ILO has released the Youth and COVID-19 Global Report. It touches upon the dual damage on youth. They have difficulty finding jobs, but their education is also disrupted. On the informal economy side, you have probably seen the same number many times since April, as ILO said that almost 1.6 billion informal economy workers are significantly impacted, leading to 6% decline in their earnings. So what to do? What to do? Obviously, most of the policymakers around the world are talking about the fiscal stimulus package, including the Bayanihan in the Philippines. And the recent ILO study found that the larger the fiscal stimulus, the lower the working hour losses, or meaning lesser unemployment. Sounds good. But the stimulus, good stimulus has been concentrated in high income countries, as you can see in the latest UNCTAD report. Just a couple of weeks ago, ILO called the world for the additional investment to be made for the developing countries, 1.2 trillion US dollars, in order to guarantee basic social protection. And ILO argues that there are many options to increase fiscal space available, such as those you can see here. Well, even there is an ongoing discussion about tapping the SDR special drawing rights. So, well, it's very difficult. We all want more stimulus, but we know there are certain limitations. But another good news is that we can look at safe workplace or safe return to work as a stimulus without much fiscal burden. Right? If stimulus packages come and many businesses are back, people are back to work, but many businesses are shut down repeatedly because of the second wave, third wave of COVID-19, then the fiscal incentive will not work. But just bringing more people back to work and do the business safely, this will be the very good stimulus without injecting additional capital in the monetary system. Of course, it's with the condition that if we address it well for micro, small, medium enterprises and the informal sector. So on this recognition, ILO and WHO in the Philippines have had discussion over the last few months and identified several areas of possible collaboration on safe work and contact tracing, connecting the unconventional nexus between the public health and the labor and employment. The 7 points are as follows. The first is the collaboration in promoting the return to work guidelines from the two institutions. The second, linking the digital solutions on contact tracing to the workplace safety support. 3, engaging employers and workers in the contact tracing. 4, support minimizing the stigma of testing. 5, making the safe workplace practices work in the MSME environment. 6, effective communication on the workplace prevention and control to the MSMEs, including those in the informal sector. And 7, safe work environment at home for those in telework. Let me visit some of these in the next few slides. So safe return to work guidelines. ILO has published the guideline back in May, and we recognize that the Philippines has also issued the similar guidelines almost in the same time. I will not get into details today. Let me explain this rather complex diagram. I think all of us have learned the new terminology, flattening the curve, during the lockdown period. So important thing is that where we keep the pandemic, we are not eliminating the pandemic, but keeping the pandemic within the capacity of the healthcare system. So the healthcare system's capacity continues increasing, and then surveillance is strengthened. And now we need to put the workplace occupational safety and health practices in this picture. So after flattening the curve, it's very important that social protection is there to ensure open and transparent reporting. Let me further explain. Because there is a fear that both employers and workers may not test or may hide the positive test result or delay in reporting, etc. Because there may be disincentive to do so. So that's why it's very important that by assuring the compensation of the lost income for the workers, identify the positive, and the lost income for the businesses to be temporarily shut down, right? And then they lose income. By providing these assurances that they will be compensated, we can address the stigma which may be around among the workers and enterprises. Right? We are talking of the proper coverage by PhilHealth, ECC for work-related infections, and adding additional compensations for the loss of income for the businesses during the temporal closure and disinfection. Okay. So globally, ILO is managing the database on two sides. On the left, we are reviewing the state practices to address COVID-19 infection as a work-related injury, country by country. And on the right, the social protection responses to COVID-19 is also being documented. So these are the basis of our social protection and employment-related injury experts to provide advices for the national constituents. By the way, in this diagram, the blue square represents the interventions which those of us working on labor and employment side can do to collaborate with the public health professionals. So the next point is making the safe workplace practices work in the MSME environment, which includes supporting workplace OSH committees and promoting safety and productivity training programs. So Philippines is uniquely positioned in this context because it has adopted the small enterprise focused OSH training of ILO, such as WISE and WIND, for a long time, which will establish the OSH committee at the workplace. Of course, at this moment, it's not branded as WISE and WIND, but it has its own national brand. No? But the equivalent contents of WISE and WIND have been, well, the thing is that WISE and WIND has been an effective vehicle in realizing safe and productive workplace for MSMEs under the past major epidemics, right? The 2009 influenza pandemic, Ebola, etc. Our WASH experts have used these training tools to reach out to micro, small, medium enterprises, including informal economy. Right? Then, most recently, the ILO Score, which also targets SMEs, has just updated its OSH module specifically for the COVID-19 context. So why the OSH camp productivity programs work? Because the rationale behind it is that good working condition contributes to higher productivity, and higher productivity, once again, having a positive feedback to the better working conditions. So this is an example of SCORE. Right? The SCORE is building the capacity in the supply chains, right? Providing a world-class training program geared to SMEs in supply chains. And we have a pool of trainers who are sectoral experts and can drive productivity and quality gains. We do not have the ongoing program of the ILO in the Philippines, but we have these programs in Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar, India, Bangladesh, China, as far as the neighboring countries are concerned. And there are very clear results of these programs. The better workplace cooperation, 42% reduction in labor turnover, 22% reduction in absenteeism, 64% defect reduction, 29% safer working environment, etc. So we have this data because the training is really the evidence and the key indicator based and driven. And we have now the new module on COVID-19 OSH as part of the program. I'm not getting into details, but if the constituents are interested, we'll be happy to discuss about the possibility of bringing these training to the Philippines. Actually, the ILO's OSH experts have been delivering the COVID-19 focused OSH training in Asian countries. There are some examples, which includes action checklists, the practical checkpoints, and they even monitor if the trained factories have actually adopted the specific infection prevention and control measures in the workplace. Another important thing under this pandemic is that safe return to work must go beyond the workplace alone, because the infection may happen in while commuting, while shopping, and at home. One of the American trade unions published the safety guide for grocery workers, and they include what to do after the work. Very good and practical. following these discussions, the WHO and the PESA recently conducted a webinar, including one module specifically addressing the issues after work. Yet another point on this diagram, collaboration, talking about collaboration between public health and labor and employment side. The communicating effectively to micro, small, medium enterprises and informal sector, well, with the understanding that it's the micro enterprises and the informal sector, informal settlements, which are not necessarily following the social distancing protocols as they should be. And it's the informal settlements where we tend to see the cluster of infection more often than the rest of the economy. So the issue is something is wrong with the communication. We are aware that there are many new initiatives trying to have better communication, even though the social media has been widely tapped by Department of Health and others. But the question remains why MSMEs and the informal sector may not be adhering as they should be. Well, comparatively speaking, of course, there are many who are already complying and putting in the occupational safety and health system in place. But if we go out in town, we can see there are many others who are not entirely compliant. So now, a very important focus of micro and informal as the missing link in the COVID-19 response. Not only in the Philippines, in many countries, we have seen the difficulties in accessing to difficulties among micro and the informal segment of MSMEs because they are informal. The government have difficulty reaching out to them, and informal economy actors have difficulty accessing to the emergency assistance. Many cannot do telework, as discussed earlier. Many cannot ride on digital economy boom. Many do not have smartphones, but still using analog phones, etc., etc. So our support to micro and informal has to tackle on these concrete challenges. Inducing behavioral change among micro and informal through an optimal communication mix will require a better understanding of their field realities. So ILO has prepared the rapid assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on the informal economy. We have a global based questionnaire, and we are doing adjustment for Philippines to address specific situation of the informal economy on the ground. And now the above discussion leads to, okay, remember that this is one of the 7 points, linking the digital tracing system to the workplace safety. We know that over the last few weeks, the DOH has been rolling out the digital contact tracing system, just as many other countries have been trying to do the digital tracing. What we would like to see is the specific linkage to the workplace safety, because they develop the dashboard and they develop the database, but we would wish to tap the power of this digital contact tracing system so that we will see the new evidences of infection and prevention, particularly sector-specific or occupation-specific risks, which will guide the new sectoral OSH guidelines. ILO team is actually working on several sector-specific OSH guidelines in the COVID-19 context. I think we have a couple of them almost ready, such as the one for the BPO, and we'd be happy to further discuss with the constituents in the Philippines whether this is an area we could collaborate further. And all these learnings will enable the OSH committees in the workplace to act on a more informed manner. Okay, well, by the way, we are aware that there are also complementary measures coming from the government, right, that realizing safe work in the existing workplace is one, but moving work back to province is another. So Balik Provincia is something that ILO team is watching with great interest as well. And of course, the telework, MSME digitalization are the important parallel interventions. So these are the 7 issue areas that ILO and WHO have identified as possible areas of collaboration, and we have had a discussion with several government agencies, including the Department of Labor, among others, and we hope to address these issues in the coming months. There are other issues that we are exploring in relation to the new normal, such as the platform economy in the new normal and the global supply chain and automation in the new normal. I know that I'm really running out of time, but let me try to cover these issues very quickly. So we, in the future of work discussion, we have been aware of these tech giants called GAFA or GAFAM, right? Mostly coming from US, but in this part of the world, it's more of Chinese and other local origin, right? That Alibaba Group has partnered with Globe and Gcash and Lazada, while the Tencent, WeChat Pay of Tencent is a partner of Voyager, Paymaya, Smart. Right? The Grab has a very dominant position in the regional car hailing market, but they are also competing very harshly with Indonesians Gojek, which is also penetrating into other countries. But each one of them are actually growing as a new integrated fintech platform, providing new suite of services through the mobile economy. And that's very strong in the Philippines, just as we can see similarly in the neighboring countries. And blockchain is here in the Philippines, disrupting banks and others. Well, we have been following this issue, so we have a specialized presentation and discussion on this topic if you would be interested further. I'm not getting into details here, but there has been a concern around the tech monopolies and the potential erosion of workers' rights through the gig economy. However, we during the past few months of the COVID-19 crisis, we have noticed that it's that these platform leaders who have been supporting the resilience of the economy and providing very important employment. And we also noted that some of them have come out with the important CSR initiatives. So we have to look at the both sides of the platforms. So and this will be the one of the major issues we need to follow in the prolonged new normal to come. A very important discussion of the ILO is that the platform economy comes with the growth of the non-standard forms of employment. Once again, I'm not getting into details of this, but ILO has the wealth of discussion and analysis on this. The next is robotics and reshoring, right? Of course, automation is a very familiar topic, but what is reshoring? Reshoring is the things that many of the advanced economies are talking these days, not just now, but over the last few years already. Well, one thing the pandemic has revealed is the vulnerability of the global supply chain, which relies probably excessively in selected places called the factory of the world, such as China. So reshoring means that bringing some of the foreign direct investment back to their home countries, but actually it also includes the reallocation of the foreign direct investment in several other countries so that the next shock will not disrupt as sharply as this pandemic. Okay, as you can see in the center, the ILO has just released the new report on robotics and reshoring. And to put the long story short, the key findings of the report was that despite all our concerns, the large-scale replacement of humans by machines, unlikely. Large-scale reshoring, unlikely, at least in the near future. That's the good news. And the impact on employment would depend on the ability to overcome the technological bottlenecks, the extent to which products are for the niche markets or mass markets, and economic factors such as relative costs. Much of what actually happens will depend on policies and social dialogue. So that's why the future work is not predetermined, but it's up to us to determine. Okay. So the technology will also enable the responsible supply chains. The responsible supply chain has been a long tradition in the ILO since we have come up with the tripartite declaration on multinational enterprises back in 1970s, along with the similar guidelines from the OECD almost at the same time, right? So since 1970s, we have now more than 40 years. Over the years, there has been the growth and convergence of more of the business and human rights principles and guidelines coming from different agencies. Among many things happened, the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh accelerated this responsible supply chain movement. And now, things like this, the blockchain for supply chain traceability has been deployed over the last, well, even before the pandemic. We have been studying this because the traceability in global supply chain does not trace where the products come from alone, but also things like whether the fair wage has been paid, whether the working condition was fair. And now under the pandemic, the food safety has emerged as one of the key elements to be traced. And of course, the responsible supply chain consideration continues, and the global supply chain leaders are trying to integrate these into their own traceability system. Okay, so before ending my presentation, this is the ILO's strategic policy framework for COVID-19 response. Many of our ongoing discussion advices are based on this framework, including 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is the economic stimulus. Pillar 2 is supporting enterprises, jobs, and incomes, including SMEs. Pillar 3 is protecting workers in workplace, including occupational safety and health and social protection. And Pillar 4 is the social dialogue as a basis of all this. So I hope that we still have time for question and answer. And I hope today's presentation has provided some inspiration for the Philippine constituents to think about what we can do in the upcoming new normal in the Philippines. Thank you very much, and salamat po.
Salamat, Mr. Hideki. No, thank you for that very informative presentation, and it is very timely for all of us to know about the future of work. But as promised, we will present the poll results that we asked our participants earlier. So, Hideki, we would like to ask your insights or reaction as we give the results. So, are you ready?
Certainly.
Yeah. So, are you ready to know the results of the first poll question?
Yes, but could you probably deactivate my video so
Okay.
that I can speak more dynamically? Okay, great.
Now we
Thank you.
can see you.
Yes.
Okay. So, can we show the results of the first poll question? We have asked earlier our participants, which of the following do they think will be the most important issue on the future of work? And 60% of our participants says that digitalization, automation of the fourth industrial revolution is the most important issue on the future of work, while COVID-19 pandemic has 31%, no? And the others 5 and 4, demographic change and climate change. What is your view about this?
Okay. Well, this is very interesting, no? As you may recall, in one of the future work slides of mine, the first 3 represents the 3 key driver of change towards the future work, right? The technology, demographics, and climate change. And now we have the 4th, which is COVID-19 pandemic. Very interesting to see that the digitalization gets 60%, followed by COVID-19, probably because demographic and climate change has not remained more or less the same under the pandemic, but the pandemic has accelerated the digitalization, and we are still struggling to find the right solution for COVID-19 pandemic. I think this situation is well reflected in the answer given.
So it's more on digitalization, no? And as we can see earlier, it's here it's more on COVID-19 responses about what we have been doing right now. But um, our participant says that it's the digitalization and automation. So let us now see the results of the second poll question, please. Okay, you see, given earlier that COVID-19, we have at least 39% or 49% says that it was um, one of the issues now, no? Here we said we ask our participants what areas of your company business operation have substantially changed because of the pandemic. Um, we can see here the highest number is 47% hiring of employees, while 44% comes from compensation and benefits administration and sales and marketing. So what can you say about this, Hideki?
Well, I think this is actually uh, the reflection of the demand, as we hear that many SMEs are participating in this webinar. Right?
Yes.
And as NWPC and the rest of the government are trying to provide support, we need to try to adjust our support measures in order to specifically respond to these needs. No? Maybe let me take one thing on the compensation and benefit administration. We talked about that informal economy are suffering a lot, right? We often hear that they cannot afford to stop working and they cannot afford to be sick because they cannot afford to go to hospitals.
Yes.
We have heard how much it costs if you are hospitalized in ICU and then you need the ventilator, etc. Right? The cost of hospitalization for the serious treatment of COVID-19 is enormous.
Yes, it's around
Right,
300,000.
right. Well, initially, I was very impressed that PhilHealth was offering the full coverage. And after some time, still PhilHealth provides the large percentage of the cost. That's very good news.
Yes.
But when some of our colleagues suffered from, their families suffered from COVID-19, we learned that actually you have to pay first. And then it takes a long time to get it paid. So what it means for the average workers, they cannot afford to be sick and treated in ICU. Right? So that's the reality. And that's why the digitalization of the government services in line with the ease of doing business initiative is very, very critical. And I understand that the government is trying to move towards that direction at the fastest speed possible, starting from the national acceleration of the national ID rollout. And we know that the Department of ICT is doing its effort to transform the government into a more efficient e-government. So there are many encouraging news, but it's very still the current system is not good enough when it comes to the actual benefit of social protection for the majority of the population.
Yes. It's very hard to get sick right now.
Right.
So let's go to the third poll question, Hideki. Can we show the third poll question, please? We also asked our participants, what are the major challenges that you think your company will face in the new normal? Um, we can see here that there are 66 participants who says that compliance with occupational safety and health standards, while the others, 56% and 55% says that adjustment of production process to meet the emerging demands of consumers and acquisition of technology. You have been discussing um, a while ago about the occupational safety and health standard, and I think this is consistent with your the result of the poll is consistent with your presentation. This is one of the challenges that we face right now in the new normal. So what can you say about this, Hideki?
Right. Uh, Yes, no, the Philippines, the pandemic has come to the Philippines in the time right after the issuance of the IRL for the new OSH Act. No? And Dole was just moving for the implementation of it. We were actually doing late last year, collaborating with ECOP and others on the CSL training, but focus was pretty much on the new OSH Act because the SMEs were very much concerned of whether they can really comply. And now with the pandemic, suddenly the OSH issue has become a lot more prominent than before. So certainly, many majority of them concerned in the compliance on the OSH issue is quite understandable. And I'm very keen to have the nitty-gritty discussion with NWPC, OSH Center, and many other OSH professionals in labor sector as well as public health sector, because we really need to work together to reach out to many SMEs, those in the informal economy who still struggle to do the right social distancing and infection prevention and control at the workplace.
Yes, I would like to follow up this question. With people using face masks already and face shields going to workplace, how this new normal will look like for you? Will it take long that we will wear these things? As you said earlier, that this will be a prolonged period of new normal. How will it be the new for you? How does the new normal look like?
Well, the thing is that we have heard several scenarios. The vaccine scenario, I think we are more or less understanding that early next year, like April or so, the clinical testing, some of the clinical testing of the first batch of vaccines will be complete, and then the vaccines become more accessible. But it's a separate question whether the majority of the population can have access to it, right? And because of the production capacity constraints of the vaccines, as well as the financial capacity constraints of the government to purchase it or the private sector to purchase it,
Yes.
and the financial capacity constraints of individuals if the vaccine is not given free, right? Because of these restrictions, we cannot expect that the vaccine becoming ready more or less in April, May next year means the end of the new normal. No, it will take a long time for more people to get access to the vaccine. And then meanwhile, we may still have to pay attention to the herd immunity issue, right? That because the younger generation may have infection, but without having serious symptoms. Then when many of them got infected, right, herd immunity may come. Of course, there is a complex discussion, and then I don't want to predict about this. We have to really be advised by the health professionals on this matter. But I know that many policymakers are also watching on the herd immunity side of the progress. So still, after more than 6 months into the pandemic, many uncertainties, right?
Yes.
That 6 months ago, some of us predicted that, oh, it may last 3 months, 6 months.
Yes.
Well, it was too
Now we are
optimistic,
in the
right?
6th month.
Right. So now it's more likely that we have to be prepared for the prolonged new normal rather than the end of new normal quickly, right? I think that's the scenario that both the policymakers as well as businesses and workers have to keep in mind, so that we can just wait until the sun rises, because the new normal will be a very different day.
Yes, it will be very different actually. So how can with these financial challenges that MSMEs are facing right now, how can they, overcome these financial challenges on compliance with the government imposed regulation on safety and health?
Right. I think you know, from the very beginning, I have been very impressed by the fast and decisive move of the government, very much based on the scientific evidences and scientific advices, as well as the global best practices. Right? It was very fast. The right. Excuse me. What was the question?
Okay. So, Mr. K, are you ready for the last poll question results? Can we show the for last result?
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I got lost. Yeah.
It's okay. Okay. And lastly, we ask our participants, what is the general prospect of your company in the new normal? This is a positive reply for to know that 73% says that company will be able to overcome the challenges in the new normal. So what are your insights about this, Hideki?
Okay. Well, this is where I suspect a bit of sampling bias,
Why?
because well, while many SMEs may be attending, many of them may be the board members of the regional productivity board, right? Regional productivity board, and those attending may be among the better off, because first they are on the positive side of the digital divide. If they are on the negative side of the digital divide, they are not here. And second, because of that, they may be continuing their businesses one way or another. They may be representing the ones who can ride on the digital economy wave, or using many platform services, Gcash, Lalamove, GrabFood, etc. Right? Those who are not may not be represented very much here, right? Because I was in Makati until a few weeks ago, and so I have seen the first 6 months of impact, right?
Yes.
If you walk around, you can immediately see many shops closed, many of them permanently closed already. MSMEs with little financial capacity, little cash flow, have already been closed, right? So those closed, those on the weaker side, those on the other side of the digital divide, they may not be here. That's why I suspected a little bit of sampling bias on this result, where we see more conviction to overcome the challenges because they are more capable ones, right? That's what I interpret this poll data.
Actually, we are seeing right now in the malls that they are shifting. They have been from clothing, from selling clothes. Now they are selling face masks, anything that is about health essential, anything health essentials. Are we seeing a shift on or business reconfiguration towards production of health essentials now?
Well, that's another complex question, because you see that there is a boom and bust cycle. We have already seen it with the face masks, and
Yeah.
we have recently noticed the bust of the face shield, right? just a few weeks ago, we saw the news that the failed seals have the price have dropped to something like 10 peso, right? How much did you? Yes, face sealed, 10 peso. How much did you pay, right? I had to pay something like 100 peso to buy face sealed before taking Grab taxi, right?
That is only the activate one, the 100 pesos.
Right. So it seems that there's already an oversupply of the face sealed. So the difficulty for businesses that, well, while we all want the local production and supply capacity, because we wouldn't want to suffer from another global disruption of health products not coming out of China, right? But as a business owner, you have to be mindful about this boom and bust challenge, right? If you are a few days late, then you lose the market. You lose the lucrative market. Suddenly, it's a cost rather than the opportunity. Right? But I understand that in the longer term, we would want more local capacity to produce the health essential goods and other essential goods. No, that's a global debate, but we wouldn't want the businesses to lose out because of this cycle. And there may be some issue for policymakers to address these challenges, because many have jumped in, partially from business perspective, but also because they wanted to help the country. They wanted to help the people, right?
Yes. That's why I was thinking that you buy a facial for 100 pesos and now it's only 25 or 10, you say?
Right. There was a news headline just a couple of weeks ago.
So you have said earlier, you have shown to us the government, you call this one? Government programs that help our people right now. What do you think? What other support does the government need to provide to MSMEs to recover and resume operations in the new normal, besides the stimulus that you are saying a while ago?
Well, in a way, summarizing some of the key messages of my presentation, right? We have an ambivalent feeling. We know that the good stimulus will help employment. The bigger the stimulus, the better the job-friendly recovery. But we also know that there isn't a fiscal limit. Right? That's why we are talking of the lower cost stimulus measures, such as safe return to work. Right? It's different from directly injecting money into the pockets of SMEs. Anyway, we can't put sufficient capital into everyone's pocket, right? Whatever emergency support provided from business perspective, it's insufficient. It's more of a survival support, not to starve. Whatever both the government and market can provide to capital constrained MSMEs, we know how many field guarantee have been able to reach out. It's very important to have that, but there is a certain limit. So that's why we need to also think about what are the kind of things that can be done with lesser cost and that can have a wider impact. That's why we say that while we cannot disrupt our continuing efforts of promoting universal social protection. Yes, we have to continue, and very important efforts are ongoing. but we also have to do a lot more on safe workplace, because training and developing and disseminating effective communication materials that will impact the behavior of micro entrepreneurs, informal economy workers, right? Then the impact will be huge, and that's the value for money, no?
Yes.
Because we know money is running out, both the government and businesses. That's why we need to be aware of those measures that can be less costly and have a wider impact.
Hideki, we have so many questions here from our Q&A box. And I have, this is coming from an anonymous attendee. It says here, the 2019 Human Development Report says there is a new generation of inequities opening up around education, technology, and climate change, and that if it remains unchecked, could trigger a new great divergence in society of a kind not seen since the Industrial Revolution. Given this, how can social dialogue help address these growing inequities?
Right. Thank you very much. This is indeed one of the key concerns of the ILO, which I included in my presentation, right? And that's also the reason behind the World Economic Forum talking about the Great Reset. We wouldn't want the new lost generation to happen because of the COVID-19 and this, if the new normal prolongs. If you lose the first few years of getting into labor market as a new graduate, it will have a long-lasting damage on their career development, right? I know that because Japan had several lost generation because of the low growth period. And, when you become 30 years, 40 years without good career path, that's a real damage for themselves, their families, as well as for the society, right? So one thing that ILO and many other UN agencies are promoting in relation to the Global Youth Report that we published a few months ago was that we need to focus on those who are likely to suffer longer and deeper because of this pandemic. Youth, informal economy, right? Those who lost job during this period, and because of the technological impact, they have little chance to get re-employed. Those are the ones we need to pay a lot more attention, right? It's no more the emergency relief for everyone. Now we have to move on to more targeted policies.
Okay. So we still have time for one question, and this is coming from our Executive Director, Griselda C. She says, in your opinion, what are the key performance indicators that enterprises should strictly monitor to be able to substantially comply with the health protocols, at the same time help government manage the pandemic in their private capacities? What is your insight about that?
This is a very good question, because this actually brings us back to that complex chart of after flattening the curve, what we can do between the public health and labor and employment side, right? And we know that the digital contact tracing system is still at its early stage of rollout, right?
Yes.
And we know that even Singapore has struggled a lot to make it penetrate into everyone's pocket. Almost everyone has mobile phones, but not everyone is downloading the app. Right?
The application.
So it may take a while, but once the data is collected, we should be actually sitting together between the public health authorities and experts and labor and employment side of us, no? So that we will find the right key performance indicator to monitor, because this is a new horizon, right? We cannot just talk about the typical labor market indicators, and then we cannot just talk about the medical professionals talking about, right, that reproduction rate, the case doubling time, right? Many new indicators we have learned during the past few months. So how can we combine these two? Which indicators the digital contact tracing system are able to bring to our attention? Which one will inform us for us to develop sector-specific OSH guidelines, right? These are the key questions, and we would be very, very keen to further discuss with NWPC, with the public health authorities, as well as the ILO concerned experts on OSH, SMEs, etc., because we need to work in among the unconventional alliance, right?
Yes.
This is a very unconventional alliance. We have to, of course, build on our tripartism, but the pandemic challenge is a bit bigger than the traditional tripartism. No? So that's, I think, because of this, the executive director sees question is highly, highly relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hideki. So there are so many questions here in our Q&A and chat boxes, but we are pressed for time. However, there are, we will gather your question. Is it okay with you if we will give you through email the questions that we gathered?
Certainly. I think that's the power of digital conferencing.
So you can answer them. Right? So,
well, I will try. I'm not, nobody has the right answer, because everything is evolving and we are still learning. No? But let's learn together, and I'd be happy to do my role.
okay.
And thank you very much for having me for today's important webinar.
Thank you. Before we leave, Hideki, would you like to leave our participants with key points that you want them to remember from your presentation?
Well, can you give me another 30 minutes to talk about it? Well, as you can see, right, that the issues we face are new and diverse, and it often goes beyond our traditional tripartite discussion, right? So it's very challenging, but I think we are also witnessing the power of technology, right? While technology may create new digital divide, but at least we can take full advantage of it. So let's continue benefiting from this technology, right? So the key takeaway is that we need to build a new skill set so that we can have a better webinars and better and more participatory web conferencing. No, I'm sorry for those of you who have provided question, feedbacks, opinions, but not immediately answered. But I will do my best to try to respond. But let's try to tackle the issue together. Healing as one. No? That's the spirit of Bayanihan in the Philippines.
Thank you, Hideki. With that, we now end our session, and in behalf of the National Wages and Productivity Commission, I would like to thank you, Mr. Hideki Kagohashi, for your presentation on the future of work in a healthier and more resilient environment. Join us again on October 1 when Mr. Sang-Yung Lee, Director of the Employment Policy Department of the International Labor Organization, discuss employment outlook transitioning to a better normal. This will be followed by Actionable Intelligence Results Amid Uncertainty on October 8, Business Reconfiguration on October 15, Employment Engagement on October 22, and finally, on November 5, automating the business side of agriculture, such as marketing of produce from farm to table. For more information, please visit our official website, like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter. Before you leave, kindly fill up the evaluation form. Let us know how else we can improve our future webinars through your valuable feedback. On behalf of my co-moderator, Ms. Nessa Nolido, I am Corky Caritativo. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next week. Ah, Ms. Nessa, do you have any announcement?
Yes, Ms. Corky, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
I would like to invite our participants from Region 6 to please do attend our webinar this afternoon. It is a guide to starting and growing your online business. You will be in at the conference room at 2 p.m. until 3:30 p.m. via Zoom. So the link is already there. You can register through our Facebook page, or you can email us at rtwpb6@yahoo.com or rtwpb6@gmail.com. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat din po. See you next week.
Bye.